Shirley Adams of the Sewing Connection, Series 15, Program 5. If there is one of you who hasn't, at one time or another, absolutely destroyed a garment by improper washing, you are a very rare person. We've all done that, but the art of mastering the situation is to turn that liability into an asset. What I have here on these mannequins are some definite assets, but they are recycled sweaters, and what they have done with them, first of all, is to shrink them purposely. Now, the first one here, Linda Davis, is who this is, and hers didn't start out as a purposeful thing. It started out as an accident. Her husband threw a sweater in a wash load, and it went through the washer and dryer, and what used to be this big came out this big. And of that, a big business was born. Linda has just done hundreds and hundreds of sweaters, recycled them into jackets and vests, and so it turned out to be a very happy accident for her. I'm not sure about Polly Trooks over there in the purples, if she did that on purpose or if she had any accidents in that, but either way, it worked out really well. Now, the reason I have these two here is because they have completely different ways of approaching it. And of course, there are always a whole lot of ways to do anything, whatever it is you'd like to do. So I'd like to present these two ways to you. Now, first of all, both of theirs are done with that shrinking it up. And the reason it shrinks so well, these are wool sweaters. Wool or any animal fiber is going to shrink like this. So whether it's wool or alpaca or cashmere or whatever it might be, it's going to shrink when you wash it. And especially when you wash it in hot water, and especially when it agitates in the washer. And the reason for this is because if you look at wool fiber under a microscope, you're going to see overlapping scales. It's the same as you look at one of your hairs. It would look the very same way. And because of those scales that overlap as they are agitated, and especially with hot water, which promotes the action, then they all kind of shrink in under and over each other and get locked together. And this is what the process is. It's called felting. And this is actually how felt is made, the fact that they use heat and steam and use wool fibers, and it turns out that way. Well, I looked through the sweaters that I wanted to get rid of in wools, and I found I had none. So since I didn't really want to destroy any sweaters, what I did have is some wool yardage. And here's the control piece. This I just cut off and did nothing to it. And you can see that this is obviously a sweater. The right and wrong side of it, you can see all the wales and courses in it and so on. Well, after I cut two of them at once, so they were exactly the same size, here is the after. That was the before, but here's the after, and you can see it came down to, well, less than half the size. It shrank considerably. And when it first came out of the washer, it was really wavy around the edges. I have pressed it somewhat. It's starting to wave again, but the point is it does press flat. But look at the difference in the quality. It no longer stretches the way the sweater itself used to. It stretches a little bit, but not completely. And it's a whole lot thicker. Now it has come up to coat weight instead of a sweater. It was kind of a heavy sweater to begin with, but now it's up to coat weight. The Austrian jackets, all those things you see that look like they are perhaps woven heavy wool, no, they are sweaters like this also that have been felted by the heat and agitation process. And then after you get them washed, you also just put them in a hot dryer and let them do their thing. Well, this is what happens if it's wool. Since I didn't have any wool sweaters to do this to, what I did it to are some cotton sweaters that are down here on the table. And you know how often you have ruined those also, sweaters or t-shirts, by putting those in the washer. And of course, when you don't mean to, it happens. But I tried to shrink these. I did it on purpose. I put it in the hottest water and the longest wash cycle, and also in the hottest dryer. They came out exactly the same size. They didn't shrink one bit. So I'm going to cut them up anyway because they're sweaters I no longer want. So let's just see so that we can see the process. Now, as far as where does she get all those hundreds of sweaters? By now she has a reputation of the sweater lady of Oklahoma. And so people send them to her from all over. And so she has a huge place to, or a huge resource to draw on. Well, the way she starts this, and they don't necessarily, again, do it the same way now. Let's just kind of look at what we see on these. Now, Polly's over here is a crazy quilt, and nothing matches anything else. You know, it's just randomly done here and there so that all the shapes are different, and the sizes are different, and the colors where they occur, everything's different on it. It was just sort of done randomly as a crazy quilt is how she meant to have that done. And then she has it all bound with a woven wool, and the sleeves are a woven wool instead of having the sweater knit throughout. What Linda has done on hers is she did 1/2 of it. So she took her pattern, or a piece of paper actually, and put it down on a table, and she did this whole half, the front and the back, and she did it all in one piece. Notice there are no side seams, there's a curvy line there, and she did the whole thing out flat, half a sweater up to the center back. There's also, by the way, no seam there. It's just that she did half at a time, get that all together. And then the other half is a mirror image. They are exactly the same. So she did this one and used that as the pattern to do the other one the same way. So there are many approaches. One isn't better than the other. It's just that there are a lot of personal choices there for you to make. And so you can't go wrong is what I'm saying. No matter what you do, it's going to turn out probably very nicely. So I'm just going to cut some of this up. And I have no idea how Linda did this, but I think if I wanted to do one a mirror image of the other, I wouldn't take the sweater apart, open it up. If I would be doing the crazy quilt, I'd open up the side seams, lay it out flat, so I'd just have that yardage and could cut wherever I wanted to. But since I'm going to do 2 of them, the 2 halves together, I think I would just cut through these both, and actually I have paper cutting scissors here, shears, but they cut through the sweater, so it's okay. Okay, I might cut a piece, this size. And notice how with the ribbing here around the bottom of it, notice what Linda has done with that. She has that ribbing here as the pocket. Well, it does stretch a little bit that way, and it makes the pocket easy to get into, so it's not a bad idea. But that's where she's used that. She's used some ribbing other places too. And I don't think I saw any ribbing on Polly, so apparently she cut hers off. So there again, some choices. But if I just come up here, now these cotton sweaters, I don't know what's going to happen. And remember last series I cut up a sweater. My husband hasn't discovered it yet in his closet that I cut up the front. As I was recycling that, I just for the fun of it put it back in there, and we'll see what happens when he discovers that suddenly it's open in front. Well, anyway, this one I'm going to cut some different shapes. So what I don't know what will happen. Now, nothing will happen with those felted sweaters. They will be just fine because they could neither ravel nor unknit themselves or do anything because they are so closely felted by now. Well, since this one isn't at all, I'm not sure, but I'm not going to handle it roughly enough to find out if it falls apart. Where I would suspect it'd be most likely to come undone would be along the cross cuts rather than the lengthwise cut. And especially if you just cut down one rib all the way, then it isn't too likely to unknit itself. Well, what I have down here on the table to cover over is just a very simple vest pattern. And this was made, of course, from my basic patterner, and all I've done here is cut out the armhole a little bit bigger, as vests always are, so that you can get blouses, sweaters, whatever in them. And all I've done then is add a front to it, and I cut a V-neck and cut that out bigger. And when I overlap them here, I'm just overlapping to approximately where the seam line would average out. And I cut it down to a shape there, or cut it straight across if you'd prefer. But anyway, when I get this all cut, I'm going to put a piece of it down, and this is like making a jigsaw puzzle, I guess, and I'll just put it down here because it seems to fit. Okay, so if we put that piece there, the other piece I'll put in a little stack and save it for the other side so that I'll be able to match it. And also the fact that when I have this sweater down here, I do have the balancing side on the other side, so I will have an exact replica when I get finished with that. And then I better get a little bit of the aqua in too. Now, I thought about this when I decided to cut them up, and I thought, now how many years ago did I wear these? Because I don't remember wearing them for the last many, many years, so I decided, okay, it's time to cut them up. They aren't anything that I would be getting back to. So I'll just, again, cut this one up, and I'm eliminating that side seam. Actually, if I wanted to have every bit of this, and if I didn't want any of it to go to waste, what I would probably do is very carefully, because it seems to be a finished edge here as it's knit together, and then just a straight stitch to sew it together, I would probably carefully take that out so that I could get every bit of it and not waste anything whatsoever. But since I'm not too concerned about it, I'll cut it otherwise. Let's see what other shapes Linda did. Now, it's, well, just about any shape imaginable. And I have no idea how she progressed with hers, but I think I would tend to cut out bigger pieces first and place them around, and then I'd fill in the funny little spaces here and there with smaller pieces later. And I suspect that's what could have happened here, because here's a small piece and here are a couple of small pieces. So I would just guess that maybe she did these pieces first that were right there at the front, the bigger pieces, and then go on from there. So you kind of isn't this fun? Gosh, I've never just randomly cut up a sweater like this before. I'll cut kind of a square here, or something or other. Whatever the shape is, there's one for you and one for this, and we'll put it somewhere else. Now here, because it doesn't quite touch there, if I put it in, because I don't want to overlap these at all. I'm just going to have the edges butt together but not overlap. And so to get this one to go in here, I'd either waste this, well, maybe I will, or I'd leave that space open and fill it up with a little something else later on. And we better get the third one in here too. And then you need to think also about this point, or before you even start, really. You need to think, what am I really going to do with this? Am I going to just have a big sweater, or am I going to have a lined jacket out of it? Because if I would be making this into a lined jacket, I would be tempted to use this form that I'm basing it on. I would be tempted there to use some fusible interfacing, just put it all on, a real lightweight one, and then fuse it down. Then it would be very easy to handle. But if I want to have it so that the inside is not lined, and so that the inside looks nice also, that's when you use it on something else and don't have anything permanently on the back side of it. So think everything through before you start doing this. Okay, and I'll just cut a triangle over here to put somewhere. And this is kind of fun, actually. Save this for a day when you need to get your animosities out on something, if you ever feel as though you have any animosities. And this is just a good way to get it all out. And then we'll put one here and one somewhere else. But you get the idea. It's just a matter of butting all these edges together, and one for the stack. And once I have this all covered, and it wouldn't take all that long, except it probably wouldn't all go together the first time. Probably the first time you'll play around with it a little bit more and see what else you can do with it and rearrange it a few times. But notice how not only the plain parts that I've been putting on here are usable. See how much textury sweater that she has in this. I'll tell you in a little while. We'll see it on a model, and I'll tell you what the name of it is, and you can see then why the texture. And I'm just going to go over to the machine, not with these, with some other pieces that I have at the machine that have been felted, that have been through the hot washer and dryer. And I'll show you the two different methods then that these ladies used to put theirs together. Okay, first of all, let's do Polly's way, because hers was the purple one, remember, the short jacket. And what she has done is not cover over those seams with any extra fabric at all. What she has done, whether they are curves or straight lines or whatever they may be, she has instead done a decorative stitch over them to attach them together. And that's a neat idea. So I have in here, the same as she has in hers, some variegated thread. So it'll come out different colors. And I think that I'm going to get a stitch here. Ordinary sewing, but let me see which stitch. About 56 I think I want. So one more, and there's 56, and it's going to make that decorative wave. And you decide, do it on a scrap first, and you decide then, is this the size you want it to be, or do you want to extend it and make it, right now it says X1. I could get it to go X2, X3, and it would draw it out so that the wave would be bigger. I have a feeling, because I'm trying to attach two things together, I'd probably want the small wave, and so I will just leave it where it is on X1. And we'll get this all together, and you can see it's starting to wave back and forth. And this is very easy when it's felted. This would not be easy on my cotton sweaters, because they aren't going to be really firm along the edge, and they aren't going to stick together the way this one is. Just for the fun of it, I'm going to push the X2 and see how it looks when it elongates a little bit. So once you learn how to control this, once you get a technique for it, you would do this on some of the scraps that you're not going to be using and then go directly to the sweater. And this is working out beautifully. Does a really nice job. So it isn't difficult. The machine does the work. You just need to hold the two pieces together and guide them through it. And just try to keep the center of the foot is what I'm doing. The center of the foot there, I'm keeping right where the line meets. So that way nothing can go wrong. It's going to go on both sides of the cut and everything will work out beautifully. Oh, that isn't bad, is it? I kind of like that. Now, as I say, I can't do that with my cotton sweaters. I've got to come up with another plan for them because they aren't going to be firm enough to do this too. Right now this is Ripley, but of course as soon as you get it finished you take it over to the ironing board and give it a good steam pressing and it'll flatten it beautifully and you won't have any problems with that. Okay, the other one, the one that Linda did then, I noticed that I'll just go back to the menu and I'll go back to ordinary and go back to zigzag stitch. And I probably don't want it this close together, so I'll make those stitches a little bit more, maybe about that far apart. And I'll make them narrower because all I want to do is catch these two together. I don't want any of these stitches to show. Give it another little bit. I don't want any of these stitches to show, so I don't want it real wide. And I'm going to cover it. Now what Linda covers hers with is wool jersey or a double knit, and she also shrinks that in the washer and dryer before she then cuts it in strips. And she said every once in a while she has actually cut up a good garment because it was the exact color of something she needed for the ribbing or for whatever. So, you know, it's people in her family, beware. She might be out to get that right color that you have in your closet. Okay, so first of all, she just puts hers together like this. And then after it's together, just so that everything will stay, and it's very firm, it's amazing, it's very strong. You could leave it like this because it doesn't look bad actually. And whether it's decoratively stitched or not, this one looks fine. But then she covers it up with wool jersey. And if you're going to cover it with anything, be sure you get the crosswise stretch here. Now I didn't wash this. And so since I didn't wash it, it's a lot stretchier than hers would be after it's felted. It then wouldn't be this stretchy anymore. But why I want to get the cross cut is because if you do have curves, this just curves around very nicely because it stretches. And if you would get the lengthwise where there is no stretch, then it wouldn't really curve and it wouldn't do as well. So what she has here is just more of the same. After she has it firmly in one piece of fabric, then she puts the covering right down the center of it and just zigzags on and off that. And by the time she uses the same color instead of a decorative color as Polly does, by the time she does it with the same color, it really doesn't even show. The thread and everything just blends together beautifully and it's completely invisible. I'll just go up the other side here too. And because it's all felted, and even if it isn't felted as hers is, it still is never going to ravel because it's a knit and I have covered the edge, and so it's going to be safe no matter what you do to it. Now, not only would this knit work well, but think of perhaps using a leather. Here's a man-made leather that might do nicely on it. And again, it's the cross cut so that it does stretch. And you also might think of using a suede. This is the same color as my knit, but it's actually a suede. And again, stretches because it's the cross cut, so remember those. And also remember, if you're going to bind any of this, be sure you use the cross cut or wherever the way of the greatest stretch is, because it'll smoothly go around curves that way. Otherwise, it would probably ripple and not look nearly as nice. Well, this is going to be easy to do. Are you tempted to do some of this? Let's see what they look like all finished up on models. And first of all, we're going to look at Polly's. And isn't this pretty when it's actually on a body? And it does look so pretty. I like the way she has combined the woven fabric, which also was felted, by the way. That woven fabric was also pre-shrunk so that it worked out the same. And then she mixed it with the sweater pieces, and it just all balances and goes together so nicely. She chose to use hers as a little bolero jacket, so there are no fastenings at all on it. And then let's look at some of Linda's. Now Linda is, I hadn't told you before, Polly, did I tell you? She's from Arvada, Colorado, I better. And Linda is from Edmond, Oklahoma. And she is pretty well known for her recycled sweaters everywhere because she shows these a lot in shows. She wins Best of Show very often for them, and they sell in very pricey wearable art shops. So, for good reason, they are works of art, and a lot has gone into them, even though the beginnings were absolutely free. Recycled sweaters, a lot of work and thought and artistic ability goes into them. But what Linda has here is something, every one of them she's named in some way. Now let's start out with these two vests and look at them. Now notice the one with buttons. Those are antique buttons. They're plastic, but they're antique buttons, and they're very interesting. And she says in a little commentary she sent to me, she says, now I started out with the ugliest sweater I ever saw, and we know which sweater that is. Well, she didn't tell me which one it is, so it depends on what you like and what you don't like, which is the ugly sweater and which is not. But that was just a really interesting one that she made that little vest out of, and then of course she bound all the edges as well as covering up the seams. And the name of that one was Fantastic Sunrise, I believe is what it was. And she's, no, this other one is Fantastic Sunrise. And, well, one of them was. But anyway, yes, this is the one because she said she looked out the day she got this finished. And it had a companion piece. It has a coat to go with it, which is now being shown in a show, so we couldn't have the coat. But this vest is called that because, and she figures it's her lucky piece, because after she got it finished, she went outside and there was a fantastic sunset, which was exactly that color. The sky was streaked that way. So it was just very pretty. Another one that she has here in greens, and look at how she put the texture throughout. There's some really interesting texture going here, and this one is called Green Pastures. And that was a good name for it because notice how up near her shoulders there are some sheep in one of the sweaters that was cut up. So that was really fun. And she said that she decides on the theme in advance and collects all the sweaters that'll do the job until she has enough of them and just the right ones. I think I counted in Polly's jacket 4 sweaters that she put together. Linda has maybe 9, maybe 10, 12. She has quite a few sweaters, but you don't use them up completely. There are always leftovers that you can go back on and use pieces in other things. So it isn't that every time you make a jacket you would have to have that many sweaters for it. You just save all the pieces and use them thereafter. Well, let's look at another one. And this one she has named Fertility. There are grapes, and there are some male and female figures in it. And some of that sweater with the people in it came from Central America, and she said it started out purple or rosy, and then it turned into this purple color, which was kind of fun, the fact that it changed, and it must have been some dyes that they used down there. But this also is just all very beautifully coordinated, collecting all those sweaters so that the colors all go together. And then I'm sure you want to see her neutral one, the yellow and beige one that you saw on the model. And what this is part of a series of America the Beautiful sweaters. And so this is the second one. This is Amber Waves of Grain. And you can see that, yes, indeed, that is what it is, amber waves. We see grain here and there because we see all these wonderfully textury sweaters. And so look at how there are grain not only in the sweaters, but you also see grain in the buttons. They are made especially for this sweater. And so they're also just beautifully grained. So they look like amber waves of grain. The fields look like ripe grain all over. And this is just a very pretty combination of things to wear with some of your neutral colors or some of the pale colors. Well, I just love what they've done. And these are all felted things that we have seen so far. Now, I want to show you a couple more that are not felted. They did not go through the washer and get deliberately destroyed. These are from Karen Odom, and you have seen things of Karen's on my program previously. And Karen has a video and a pattern out on this called A Sweater Again. And what she has done is taken several sweaters, and she's cut them in long strips. And after the strips were all cut, she did not felt these because she plans to always dry clean it, and she didn't want that felted look. So either way is just great, whichever you prefer. But all of these sweaters she kind of collected until she found colors that she liked the way they went together. And she seems to like to, in hers, put a broad strip down the back maybe, and then put some more of that same kind down the front here and there. but it's just really nicely done. And what she does is, first of all, build the fabric. And then after she thinks she has enough fabric, or as much as she's going to have, she puts the pattern on and cuts it out. And if she needs to supplement it, look at the other sweater where she has supplemented this with some woven fabric. She has some plaid mixed in with the sweaters. And it is in kind of darker colors. Well, they're both in darker colors, but anyway, this one has a lot more woven fabric mixed in with it. Either one of them, just beautifully done. And fun things. This really makes me want to get out all the sweaters. Not of mine. I already told you I didn't want to have any more to get rid of. I want to get some of John's sweaters out and see what I can do with them and do something really fun to recycle them, make them new again. Well, we made it through the old sweaters and it was such fun. Let's give it another go round. What else is there in your closet that deserves a new life? Do not send it to me, please. I have enough of my own. But do accept the challenge to turn it around to something really pretty. Next time, we're going to see some of these things on transformations. I'll see you then.